and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, my brother from another coven, it's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Doing really well. Do you want to go sing a song with me in a secluded location?
Yeah, sure. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
This week on the show, we're going to be chatting about the newest MCU TV project, the sequel / spin-off to WandaVision. We're going to be chatting about Agatha All Along, a television series that, Matt, I never thought we would be doing a whole episode of this podcast on. I can pretty much guarantee that never would have entered my mind before I sat down to watch this thing a couple weeks ago.
At this point, my heuristic for like whether a show is going to be good is like if it's like a third string character from a derivative project from a third string character of a different movie franchise that is totally peripheral to like the main thing that the studio is doing, it's going to be the best thing that they ever do.
Yeah, I think that's absurd, but somehow fair. So yeah, we're going to be talking all about Agatha All Along this week. This will be a full spoilers discussion. We'll be discussing all 9 episodes of the series that are available right now on Disney Plus, and probably some WandaVision spoilers, I guess, also, and maybe some Doctor Strange 2 spoilers, also.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, it's all everybody listening has already seen all of those things.
Sure. We're going to wrap up the show by talking about some exciting news in the world of Star Wars, Matt. Can you believe it? We're back.
Oh.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this. Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be a good little Matt's going to get up on a soapbox here at the end of the episode, and we're going to have some fun.
Yes, we are.
All right, let's get into the main segment, though. Let's talk all about Agatha All Along. Matt, what is this television series all about?
A spellbound Agatha Harkness regains freedom thanks to a teen's help. Intrigued by his pleas, she embarks on the witch's road trials to reclaim her powers and discover the teen's motivations.
This series was created by Jacqueline Schaefer, the same woman who made WandaVision. It stars Kathryn Hahn, Joe Locke, Aubrey Plaza, and more. A whole cast of characters that are wonderful. Matt, I think before we get into this show, it might be important to lay some context here for folks listening that maybe aren't frequent listeners to ours and didn't hear us talk about these Disney Plus television shows from years and years ago now. So for me personally, WandaVision was the first Disney Plus show to come out. I fell in love with it immediately. The first 4 episodes I thought were incredible. I was like, holy shit, we're doing this thing. Marvel can do no wrong. Amazing. And then unfortunately, the series continued after that and just kind of went downhill there for me until the end. And I think we did a podcast episode on the show, and the end was really, really disappointed me. And almost ruined the show for me. And then basically from there, the Marvel television experience has been just kind of constant disappointments. There's not like there were things that I just didn't like very much. There are things that I liked parts of, but I basically, like, over the past few years, I just kind of fell off of watching any of these anymore. I just stopped doing it. And I was treating this show the same, where I just wasn't going to watch it. And I was like, a spinoff character from a show that I loved for 4 episodes and then didn't like anymore? Why would I spend my time on this? But people kept talking about it, and so I finally checked it out, and now we're here. So what is your experience with the Marvel TV experiment?
Pretty similar to what you just described. People kept talking about it. Then you watched it and you said it was good, which counted for a lot with me. And overall, I wouldn't say I'm very invested in Marvel at this point in Marvel history. I mean, if anything, the sort of reference I was making earlier in this conversation was actually about Andor, which is, of course, another Disney show.
Sure.
But the point was, like, it actually seems that the further away a project is from, like, the eye of Sauron of the studio, the more room it has to breathe and actually be its own thing and have a kind of narrative coherence, which is a thing I'm going to talk about a lot. But yeah, I mean, I sat down to watch this and I was like, I'll give it a shot. And I think I watched like 6 episodes in a single sitting. And then I finished the show the next day because partly for the memes and partly because I was that invested. So, if you haven't watched the show and you're considering it, that is kind of the sales. That's kind of the perfect sales pitch that I can give. Where like I don't have to say anything else. I just say I'm not even somebody who watches a lot of things, but this just sucked me in and had me pinned for the duration.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm my bold statement here at the beginning of this episode is going to be I think this is the best television Marvel has done so far. Like I'm looking over the list right now. Just to refresh your memory, Matt. Here we go. We have WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, Secret Invasion, Loki season 2, What If season 2, Echo, didn't even realize that came out actually. And then Agatha All Along. So that is our list of Marvel television shows. And having read that list, I'm even more confident, and I don't think it's particularly close. I think this is the best thing that they've produced so far, and it's shocking to me that that's the case. Like I just want to reiterate the fact that this show is good is it, like jaw dropping to me. Like I just never would have expected this. Like this has been a long gestating, long in production show. Like the name of the show changed like 60 times, but it like quickly became apparent that that was actually just a marketing gimmick, and it's just like Agatha being silly that the name of the show was changing so many times. um I didn't like love the Agatha character in WandaVision. I thought she was fine, but it wasn't like, oh yeah, I need more of this chick. um and yet what the show does is just incredible.
Mhm.
Like truly just like, I mean, I don't know how deep we're going to get in this conversation. I think the show is exploring a lot of different things, but I think you're just right. Just from like a watchability perspective, like just the general structure of the storytelling in the show is just so captivating that like it's so fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's my whole thing. That's what I came to the microphone wanting to talk about is just like this is just a textbook on storytelling and structure and character arcs. You've got it's got this conceit of the witch's road. We're in spoilers now, right?
Yeah, we've
we
always been
we
in
were always
spoilers.
in spoilers. It's got the conceit of the witch's road as this concept where it's like, oh, so there's going to be a series of trials, and we can structure a season of television around a series of trials, and then each of the characters is going to have their moment in the sun, which is going to be associated with a specific trial. This is a brilliant conceit. This is a brilliant structural conceit
Yep.
for specifically for a season of TV where it's going to be episodic and serial. um just like as soon as that was clear what we were doing, I was like, oh, I wish I thought of that, right? it's
Yeah.
it's such a good way of structuring it. And then of course, all the characters are compelling. you're
Hmm.
they're distinct, they're well acted. um I And then furthermore, I guess the final kind of opening remarks on like what I liked about it is I can't think of a better thing that does the like mystery box thing where it's like, aren't you curious about the where this kid is from? Aren't you curious about what's going on with this relationship between these two characters? And then like satisfyingly answering those and not leaving you feeling like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that technically, no, I was I felt very satisfied by the way everything wrapped up in the end, which at this point in time is just quite rare. Very often you feel like you've been sold a bill of goods by the time the ending of a long running story rolls around. But I did
Yeah,
not
I
feel
mean,
that way.
I think I did and I didn't, and I want to talk to you about the very end of the ending because there's a lot of very satisfying things that happen in the ending, and then there's the end of the ending, where I did feel a little bit frustrated by what we did or didn't do, but we can get into that later. Um, but mostly, like I think you're so right about the structure, and like I mean, you've heard me say this multiple times. One of the things that frustrates me so much about modern television is just that it's not television anymore. It's just a very long movie with awkward cuts in it every hour or so.
Mhm.
It's not using the concept of an episode structurally to help frame the story. And like that was the thing that the first 4 episodes of WandaVision did so perfectly, right? Because you had this structural conceit of sitcom television through the ages, and each episode of WandaVision is Wanda with her magic spell pushing them forward in time from a decade of sitcom television. And then that show kind of abandoned that. This does a very similar thing with The Witch's Road. Like you said, this is we have this overarching structure of this is our goal, this is where our characters are going, we've defined these trials, and then we can make an episode be episode X is trial Y. And because of like the fun stuff we're doing like thematically with the characters and how the characters are tying into each of the trials, like they have their own aesthetic, they have their own look, it feels very unique and different. You know, we can say we've got the Wicked one. We've got the 80s kids board games one. We've got the recording studio one. You know, like there's it just allows each episode to feel unique, to feel like an episode of television, and I just love that so much. I will say, and we'll probably talk about this more. The one exception to this for me is, and the place that the show got very close to losing me is episode 6 has a big reveal at the very end of episode 5. The big reveal is that the unnamed teen, is actually Billy Maximoff, one of the 2 twin sons of Wanda Maximoff. And I was like, oh no. I was like, we were doing so good with the show. I was loving how the show was like taking these characters from this other thing, but not making this a Marvel property, and that we're going to have to pull in all this Marvel stuff and make it all tie into this larger thing going on. And then I felt the show almost like cry out in pain as as it did this. And then I really did not like episode 6, where we kind of go through everything and give Billy's to understand how Billy got to where he is here. Didn't really like that. But then episode 7 came along, which was the one where they were dressed as a Wizard of Oz and Snow White characters. It was the one focusing on the what was her name? I can't remember the names of the witches, but where she's traveling through time, at least in her head, and
Yeah.
that is like the best episode of the show. So it's like I got nervous, and then the show completely redeemed itself.
Mm.
So
Interesting. Yeah. So I actually liked the Billy Maximoff stuff personally. I think that was some of the best stuff from WandaVision, in my opinion. With the idea, the sort of like Twilight Zone idea of she created this world for herself, even to the extent of creating children just using her magic, basically.
mhm.
And then we proceeded on with the Multiverse of Madness movie, which focuses very much on the idea that these really are her children, and she really loves them, and she's really looking for them. Which interestingly, just parenthetically, kind of makes that even sadder, that her actual child was somewhere, she just didn't find him.
Mhm.
Um, but anyway, to back on topic, I think it's again like delightfully sort of dark and outer limits and witchy. The idea that this random poor kid dies in a tragic car accident and his soul is replaced by the magical essence of a Maximoff boy fleeing from the dissolution of the spell. Like I thought that I was like, oh, like frankly, that's one of the things that I'm referencing when I say that the resolution of the mystery was actually satisfying. So it's fine that we just don't feel the same about this. But for me, that wasn't like a worrying development. That was like, oh, that makes sense, actually. you know.
Yeah,
So
so let me try to clarify a little bit more. I think ultimately I ended up liking it. I think what I was experiencing was not even anything specific to that episode itself, which, because I agree with you, like it's a fun conceit of him. Like I actually liked we got to meet this kid as just like this young teenager going to his bar mitzvah, and then suddenly his life changes when he dies. And
Mhm.
like I loved the parts of like imagining what was going through the minds of his parents, as he's just basically become a completely different person overnight.
Mhm.
But sometimes parents just feel that about their teen kids anyway. So I thought that was a fun little reflection on what they must think, is like, oh, this is a teenager now. He's just totally different. But um, I liked all that. I think what I was feeling was I was feeling like the Marvelness invade my show, which is not fair because this is always a Marvel show. Like even Nicholas Scratch, the name of Agatha's son, is like a MCU character.
Mm.
So like it was always here, but I just like didn't feel it. And so when the Wanda stuff started suddenly pushing its way into it, like I just rolled my eyes so hard at the moment when he gets the freaking crown on his head that looks like her crown. I was like, no. It ended up being okay. Like it did. Like I think the show did a really good job of earning every moment it used from that, and it didn't spin out within the context of the show into this larger gonna connect to the entire MCU and everything that's going on in the current phase stuff. It didn't end up doing that, and so I like retroactively enjoyed it. But like, yeah, my
Mhm.
experience in the moment was this could not have been the worst decision for me, and I'm very thankful I stuck through it.
That's fair. So while we're airing our issues, this is one of those places where I don't quite know how to feel, so I'll mention it and we can maybe I can figure it out.
Sure.
Um, because I guess I frankly don't know how to feel about Agatha as a character. Which like you would think would be damning when it's like she's the main character of the show. Obviously, you should know how to feel about her. But the truth is, all the other characters were very strong. It was sort of an ensemble show, and so they all carried me. They were all sort of much simpler. They had simpler through lines, so they were just it's just like yeah, it's kind of A to B to C storytelling, and it worked on me. But hers is this thing where she's this zany, like super sarcastic and she has this like cutting wit at all times. And but then there's moments where you're like, oh wait, that's just a veneer that she throws up to protect herself. And she's actually this terribly tragic character underneath. But then also she's a mass serial killer. And that's the element that I don't know how to square. Like, how do they want me to feel about? Because the final episode, when it maybe we were supposed to know this already, but when they were showing her just murdering tens, if not hundreds of people, depending on whether like this is a montage meant to just show that she was doing this consistently for centuries, I was just like, oh, so she's a monster actually. Like, why do I feel empathy for her? Or you help me out here.
Yeah, I mean, we did know that Agatha is like famous for like witch killing. Like that's a thing that she was established for in WandaVision, that like she's an evil, awful witch and she's a monster. We definitely knew that. So I don't think the reveal at the end of the episodes that when we're watching her kill all these covens, the reveal was not that she was murdering people. The reveal, I guess, was that she was doing it via this witch's road thing that she and her son invented, and using that to trick unsuspecting witches, um, and then sucking their powers from them. um I love her as a character, and I agree with your kind of confusion on this, because the show plays very loose with this, where she's just consistently a terrible person, like
Hmm.
just like throughout the show. Like she's fun, first of all, like she's
Yeah.
fun, she's zany, like it's fun to watch her, and she's having a good time. And it's also fun to imagine everything in retrospect with the witch's road, knowing what we figure out at the end, which is that it was all an invention of Billy.
Hmm.
Um, that like every moment in this movie or the show, when they're on the witch's road, she has no idea what the fuck's going on.
Yeah.
She's just kind of like winging it. And like it's like there's so many moments in the show where she's like giving surprised expressions or having reactions to thing that you don't really think about in the moment, because it's just, oh, it's just Agatha being zany. But it's her just like being like, holy shit, holy shit,
Yeah.
this isn't supposed to be what happens, and this is happening, and I'm just kind of running with it. um I think it works. And I mean, I like her ending as a character because I agree with you. Like, she's awful, but she dies at the end.
Yeah.
It's like she says to Billy, like, this wasn't about saving you, right? Like, I didn't do this for you. It was just a calculated move. I'm like, nah, that's bullshit, Agatha. You were
Hmm.
doing it for him because he reminds you of your son. You said that yourself. Um, and I really like this idea of her, like the reveal that the reason she's been living so long, like why does Agatha keep going? Why does, even after she loses her son, she continues to do this? She continues to lure in witches, steal their power, prolong her life. Why all of this? And the answer is because she's terrified of meeting her son in the afterlife and having to face him for the person she is and the things she's done. And so she just keeps doubling down on all this stuff. Um, I guess this kind of gets to what I don't like about the end is I feel like we just kind of left that unresolved at the end of the story. Like, she just so she's dead, but also she's a ghost, and now she's going to stay a ghost, and her and Billy are going to go on MCU adventures from now on, I
Yeah,
guess.
because we can't actually kill her.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I guess that's I feel you, but it doesn't bother me too much. I agree with 100% of everything you said. I think my confusion, this is going to maybe sound silly, but maybe be relatable, is like the fact that it's an MCU product is what actually I'll explain what I mean because I don't think it's obvious. I'm so used to the MCU storytelling being black and white and relatively moralizing about right and wrong, that the idea, like, it's like, well, she's bad, how can she be the good guy? Like, I'm literally thinking like childish thoughts, and it's like that while you were talking, I was like, well, you just kind of forced me to imagine, like, what if this were just some TV show that existed about witches, and there's the main character witch. She's a witch. She's awful. She's an evil witch. But also there's some complexity to it. There's some backstory there. She feels some degree of guilt. Doesn't mean she's not a monster, but she's human. I would get that. Like, I would have no trouble getting that. What surprised me was that the MCU decided to make this character the protagonist of the show. Like you can see a world where they try to make Billy the protagonist of the show
for sure. Yeah,
rather than being a side character.
yeah.
Um,
And I think the show would be worse for that. Like,
yeah,
it would be a very bog standard MCU show that I probably wouldn't have liked very much. So
yeah,
yeah. I get that. I think it's part of this is Catherine Hahn just like having the best time playing this role. Like, you could just tell, like, there are times when you know that actors just are fully aware of the fact that these are roles that don't come up every day and you'll probably never get an opportunity to play again. And so you need to devote everything you have in this moment towards it and have as much fun as you possibly can with it. Cause who knows when you'll get to do this particular thing again.
hmm
And she's so good in it. She's so delightful in this role. And that, like, I agree with you. Like, it's actually quite amazing that the show gets me, noted murderer hater Scott Daly.
deontologist.
Yeah, oh yeah, there you go. Classic deontologist. Murder is always bad, Scott Daly.
Uh,
To just actually not really care that she's a mass murderer. Like,
uh-huh.
it's so funny to me. The final episode of the show is Billy kind of having to reckon with the fact that everything that has happened in the show up until this point was created by his brain, which means every one of the witches in the coven that died over the course of this whole thing was because of him. He was putting them through those trials. He was killing them, and he's really racking with that idea. And Agatha's response to him is basically like, "Look, I was going to kill them all anyway.
Uh-huh.
And actually, you saved one of them. So technically, you're like +1."
Yeah.
And it's just like it's a hilarious exchange, and like I could tell the show had me because I was just like, "Hey, yeah, she's right. Don't feel
Yeah.
bad about this, Billy. You're good." Like, and that's I think the fun of the show is it can do these things, it can have this awful person, but then yeah, it's also telling this really fascinating story about this woman and this immense grief she's been feeling for hundreds and hundreds of years because of the death of her child. And like I found the final episode and the stuff with where we learn about Nicholas Scratch and we learn about, quote unquote what she did, um just incredibly moving.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I wonder, you got to imagine there were some conversations in the writers' room that were like, we need to we need to make it more obvious why she's motivated to kill all these witches. Like so, there's the element that her original coven in um, Salem, I guess, tried to kill her for, uh being a heretic of some kind. I forget the detail because I feel like that was actually revealed in WandaVision and I forgot what it was. Um, do you remember like what her original crime was?
I do not.
I certainly don't.
I mean,
Um,
just power, probably.
yeah. Well, point is like and then there's a scene in this movie, this show where the ghost of her mom appears and says like you were born evil, and it's like wow, you kind of see the reaction of the other witches is like, oh, okay, I kind of see maybe why you have the attitude you do, is if your mom is this person.
Yeah.
Um, but I like that they didn't kind of overdo that and make it be like actually all of the witches that Agatha killed had it coming. They decidedly did not do that, and they kind of
No.
let her be a broken, scary monster, but then they also give her that humanity. I think it's actually admirable that they stuck to that and let it be complex and difficult to deal with.
Yeah, and they
Um,
didn't entirely give her a redemption arc either, right?
mhm,
Like, I guess sort of like her choice to let death kill her over Billy is sort of redemptive,
mhm,
but also like again, it is interesting that like she doesn't go towards the light at the end of the show. She's not like, yes, I'm ready to face my son and face my past. She's still running from the afterlife. She's still running from death in the same way she was before. It's just now that she's a ghost.
mhm.
Which is a little silly and a little eye rolly at the ongoing we can never kill anyone in the MCU stuff, but also it kind of fits her very well, and it doesn't do that classic redemption arc thing.
Yeah.
um I guess I have a question for you, and something, the only thing I'm really unclear of in her backstory is, so obviously she births the child. Aubrey Plaza as death comes to her and says like, hey, by the way, I'm gonna take that baby
Mhm,
real soon. And she basically cuts a deal with death that is just like, give me more time. And then that's when she kind of starts her mass witch murder.
mhm,
And I wasn't clear if the original impetus for like drawing these witches in and then sucking their power was specifically to help her son or not, or if that was just something completely different. She's just taking this power because she can, because they're on the run. She never knows when her time with her son's going to be up, and so she's just living the way she wants to make sure they have the most amount of time together possible. um I don't know, what was your take on this,
w
like, because the thing that, and I don't know if I'm trying to read too much into the show, but she is trying to lure another coven in. Her son feels bad about it and stops it from happening. And then, like, that night, he dies.
mm,
And I don't know if that's just like coincidence of events, like, and maybe it wasn't even that night. Maybe time had passed, and what we were just demonstrating this is that her son is starting to feel guilty about this life that they're living, which him dying not long after that kind of crystallizes Agatha, sorry, like guilt around continuing to do this because she knows her son did not like it. I don't know.
yeah. Well, so you reminded me of one adjacent question that I had, which is like, wait a second, like, was this a deal that she had with death, where it's like, you provide me with an unending stream of dead witches, and I will refrain from taking your son as long as that flow is kept up. And I was like, I didn't think that was like explicitly a deal. The reason I say it though is that later on in the show, or I mean earlier in the show technically, because yeah, you know what I mean. Like sh- she literally says like, I'll deliver you your bodies, meaning she's gonna kill these witches, and it's like that's an understanding between them. And I don't know quite how to factor that in.
Yeah, so okay. That's a fair question. I thought the same thing. My read on this was, and ultimately I don't know how much this matters, but my read on this was that she just made a deal with death at the time that was just like, I don't know if there was any exchange at the time of her son. It was just like, death comes, I'm gonna take him someday, and she says, "No, can you just give me a bit more time?" And Aubrey Plaza just kind of really likes her. Like, there's a lot of sexual tension between these two characters for sure.
Uh-huh.
And so she just kind of likes her and says, all right, fine. I'll give you some more time, but like, I'm gonna come for him eventually."
Mhm.
And then I think the kind of deal and the exchange for bodies is Agatha's been alive for hundreds and hundreds of years, and she's like defying the natural order of things, and like she's keeping death at bay by giving her these constant string of bodies, which is like, it's both true metaphorically and literally, because like she is also keeping death at bay. Like, she's keeping the personification of death at bay by giving her these other witches. She's also keeping the concept of death at bay by un like by artificially prolonging her life by sucking other people's powers.
Mhm.
Um, so that was my interpretation of that. So I really settled on the thing that just like Nicholas, her son, just dies
Mhm.
not long after that thing happens, and it's just like his time was always going to be up. It was always going to happen,
Yeah.
and then it just happens then.
I that was my take in the moment. The only reason I even question it at all is the idea of there being a quid pro quo definitely does sort of fit. It's just, well, we didn't really see that, and I think I just like it better if there's no quid pro quo. It's just death literally just gave her an extension out of like fondness for her
Yeah.
because they had some relationship, and
Hmm.
but it couldn't last forever. Um, yeah, I think that's it. I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it. Um, was it just me, or did you want to see like a whole show of Agatha being a police detective in a small town?
So I have a question for you.
Uh huh.
Did you understand what that was doing? So
Um, I I vaguely remembered that Wanda had cursed her to think that she was still a citizen of the town and forget who she was, but I don't think I fully understood, like, okay, this is a hallucination and everyone else is actually not doing is probably not doing anything like what they appear to be doing,
yeah,
etc. Like, I didn't get the full spectrum of it, but
okay.
I definitely was like, okay, this is the manifestation. It's basically the first few episodes of WandaVision again, except it's this character now, and she doesn't even know that she's in this situation because she was cursed. That's the extent to which I understood it.
Yes, that is all 100% correct. What I was more talking to is that this show that she's in is a very specific parody. And this is kind of
Oh, okay.
when I realized I was going to love the show, is that they're going to go this specific with a parody. So there was a show that came out a few years ago called Mayor of Easttown. It is a story about a gruff woman detective in Easttown, Pennsylvania, played by Kate Winslet, who is doing like a Pennsylvania accent, and it's a very good show. I enjoyed the show very much, but this is like a pitch perfect parody of it. Like, it is
Okay.
so good and so funny. Like, and it's just like, for the show to open with something like that specific, and I think it's a testament that it works broadly because you had no idea what it was parodying,
Hmm.
and you still appreciated it, but it is also so specifically parodying this one show, and I think it is also like parroting these dark detective shows in general, but very specifically Mayor of Easttown, because I'm pretty sure they call it Agnes of Westview, right? Is the name
Hmm.
of the detective show that she's on. Um, I loved it so much, and yeah,
Hmm.
there was a part of me that when we broke the spell and moved into just Agatha back in the town, there was a part of me that was like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
kind of wanted to see more of that." I think fortunately the show maybe almost recognizes that, and then like defines the witch's road thing almost immediately, and then gives us the structure of the rest of the series to the point where we're like, okay, I'm on board again. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, that opening episode was just absolutely remarkable. It was so good.
Yeah, right. Like I was disappointed, and I was like, oh, I kind of wish this were like WandaVision, where at least the first several episodes were, different parodies of different just continue doing that thing. That was my
Mhm.
favorite part of the other show. Do more of it. And then they broke out of it, and I was like, oh man. And then they immediately, like you just said, they went into another thing that worked even better on me, and pulled me in with all the other characters. Um, which really like grew like that's some good character work. Just how quickly they establish them and introduce them, and then you find that you actually care.
Yeah.
I was surprised. Number one, I was surprised that they killed off the poor neighbor woman who wasn't even a witch. I was just so sure. I was so sure that like it was going to end with her not actually being dead because she wasn't really a witch or something.
Mhm.
But just like, no, she's dead. um,
I just love that, like, it's that they allow themselves to go there, like,
yeah,
and just kill her, and yeah, like,
yeah,
lots of these people, like, Alice dies, Lilia dies, almost all of them die,
hmm
um, and like, yeah, these were great. This is the thing I didn't expect. Like, I think I went into the show, and even when I understood the structure of the show, I was kind of in it for Agatha, and I was starting to be interested in who we knew as Teen at the time. A guy plays this guy, a kid named Joe Locke, who I'd never seen in anything else, plays Teen. I think he does a pretty remarkable job with that character.
hmm
But yeah, I just wasn't expecting to kind of fall in love with the rest of this coven. And I think the show really, you're absolutely right, does a really fantastic job with these three other witches. And even poor Mrs. Hart, who is she was in WandaVision. She also is from That 70s Show. Of course, it's the thing
Oh
I'll
yeah.
always know her from is the mom in That 70s Show. Um, like like I love all these women, and like Lilia being the one that I loved the most was also surprising. I mean, I guess it's not like Patty LuPone is like a incredibly famous, like storied actress, been working forever, um and she's really really good in this show as well. It's just like I just didn't expect to like all these characters as much as I did.
Yeah, I felt the same. I thought it was very deft. Very good job. That's what we want out of stories. That's what I always want out of TV, is like actually please make me care about the characters. And it so
Mhm.
rarely happens. I almost sometimes feel like, oh, as I get older, stories don't work on me anymore because I can see through them, and it's like, nope, not true, because this still works on me.
Yeah, and like the Alice character, she's got this family curse that's been hounding her entire life. We learn her mother has popularized the Witch's Road song, and it turns out is just a protection spell for her. Like, I loved all that stuff. I thought that was really good, and then it's heartbreaking when she dies, and the show, like, I just I can't underestimate and over explain how refreshing it is to be in a Disney Plus television show with the Marvel label, and like a bad thing happens to a character and it sticks, and we have to live with the consequences of that bad thing happening. Like, Alice saves Agatha's life and pays for it by Agatha sucking her dry of all her power. um, and then she's just at the end like, "I couldn't help it, but yeah, she could." And it's like, "Oh, like that I feel things, and you're letting me feel things, and you're not undoing it immediately. There's not gonna be like there was a moment where when it was revealed that this was all Billy,
Uh-huh.
that I was like, "Oh no, are we gonna like say like he's gonna undo it all, and
Yeah.
everyone's gonna be alive again?" And I just would have been so angry if
Yeah.
they had done that. And they didn't. They stuck to their guns. And it's like it's so it's so incredible that like my my line now, my threshold is like, have
Uh-huh.
consequences. And that's like, did you make consequences for character choices? You did? Yay.
Yeah.
I like you now. Like that's it. That's what that's what my expectations are at now.
When we were doing the Kaiser Soze part, when he's looking around his bedroom and seeing all the clues that he fabricated it, I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, it's all going to turn out to have been completely fake, and all these women are still just alive, living their lives, and weren't even involved." And no, we did not do that.
Thank God. Thank
Yeah.
God.
Um, this is random, but normally I'm pretty good at recognizing faces, but it took like halfway through the scene with Quicksilver, aka Ralph Boner, aka Evan Peters, the actor, before I recognized who he was, and then of course the show tells you who he is. But I guess he had like this fake beard on that made his face look different.
He does look a
Um,
little different. I mean, I knew who it was immediately, but like I was also trying to be like, do I actually am I recognizing him?
mhm.
Um, that's like those are some of the parts of WandaVision that I really liked is that the show like was intentionally fucking with us and faking us out with this guy. It's like, oh look, it's that we're doing a Fox universe crossover thing. It's like, no, we're not. We're just fucking with you. And
Yeah,
like that cameo here is just kind of more having fun with that concept and idea. Like it's just like he's just he's just there to be funny and that's it.
uh-huh.
And I appreciated that.
Yeah. Well, he is there to be funny, but also at the same time, like the Twilight Zone uh, horror of the situation. Like just in general, I guess I really appreciate the whole Wanda axis of MCU. Like definitely Multiverse of Madness had its flaws, but I loved 100% of the horror of it. I love that Sam Raimi got to be operatic with how
Yeah.
how crazy and upsetting and terrifying that movie got. I loved all the weird again. I keep referencing Twilight Zone just because it's a very specific vibe of like unsettling sci-fi fantasy that's meant to make you feel a little scared, a little unsure. That was WandaVision, and I love how that crops up here. Like we've got the Salem 7, we've got kind of these references to Ralph Boner's horrible, tortured existence, um, and the trauma that lingers. Even though he is a comic relief character, we got the idea of this child created out of nothing, and then his soul flies off and finds itself in a dead boy. Like
Hmm.
like all this stuff, all this tapestry of elements. It's like they feel so different from everything else in the MCU, but they're just so fun. And I don't know, they just work for me really well. I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the parts of WandaVision that really disappointed me were when it just was flying space lasers again and like
Mhm.
we were doing all that shit at the end. But like the emotional core of what was happening in that show, I think never stopped working on me. And I agree with you. The best parts of Doctor Strange are the parts that are carrying that forward. She's a great character. I mean, I don't know what we're gonna do with her going forward, but I do agree with you. I like that the kind of the tendrils of her actions are still being thrown out there. I don't know where we go from here. I guess we're gonna eventually have to find Tommy, and then maybe Billy and Tommy will be on the Young Avengers, and I'll kill myself. But for now, like I really like this, and I love how Billy is very conflicted about his mother. Right, like he doesn't like being called the son of Wanda Maximoff. Right, he
Yeah.
doesn't like that because I mean, are these I guess the souls of these people? Because like I'm trying to remember the freaking Sam Raimi movie. I don't. There's so little of it I remember, but like, didn't she just like grab two children from alternate dimensions and just say you're my children now? I just don't remember exactly what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, spoiler for the end of that movie, but she basically the plot of that movie is she's trying to get a hold of um is it is it America Chavez is the girl who
Yes. Yes.
who can make portals between realities
Hmm.
because she wants to use her to access different realities more easily. I guess she's restricted from doing that by Doctor Strange or something. Doesn't really matter. The point is
Something.
she
Yeah.
ends up finally at the end of the movie like finding a universe, a parallel universe, a different universe where a different Wanda Maximoff is just being the mom to these two boys. And then she tries to steal them, but is not successful because she sort of can't bring herself to become the monster that she needs to be to, kill another version of herself, or just
Okay.
steal children from another version of herself. And she, amazingly well acted moment where she just is like totally heartbroken, but still able to give up on this. And then like that's her redemption. She actually does get closure. And I, I, I feel like Marvel's going to have such a hard time not bringing her back because, they literally said, "Did you see the body?" It's like nobody saw the body.
She's coming back for Avengers 7.
Yep. 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 Till you're 90.
Yeah, but like I think we can continue to live in this brief moment in time where that was handled um very, very well. Maybe we'll just like create an alternate universe for ourselves where that's the only place this goes. No,
Yeah.
thank you for refreshing my memory on that. So this version of Billy is not that kid. It's like essentially a creation of Wanda.
Yeah. It's the kid who was in the hexagon or whatever,
Mhm.
whatever shape it was, who lived like a month of life at a hyper accelerated rate. And then
Yeah,
I think that's partly why he's so like, confused. Is he's
yeah,
sort of not a person fully. But
sure.
he's had a few years of life at this point. So
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Really great stuff. I really liked Teen. I really liked going like he's like they take no shortcuts with this character, right? Like we get to meet him before we know him and see like who he is as a person before the stuff is revealed. And like I really thought when the Wanda reveal came that he was going to fundamentally change as a character, and it would have been another thing that I would have been a little disappointed about, right? It like if okay, he was this one person, but then as soon as we know he's a Maximov, he's going to just start acting more like Wanda, and he still retains like his central goodness. He just also has this kind of power in him that he only barely starting to understand, and shows remorse and guilt and like I don't know. He's just really well drawn.
yeah. Yeah, I'm excited. Like, if this was us establishing a critical core member of the Avengers, the new Avengers going forward, great, perfect. I'm happy. I like this character. I want to see what this character gets up to next.
I do
Good.
too, but I don't want to see it in an Avengers movie. I
Y-
really don't. I
Yeah,
really don't.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
If the next time we see Ghost Wanda and Billy like looking for their brother Tommy is like in Act 3 of Avengers 7, I'm just gonna kind of be a little disappointed.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good at this point at like selectively deciding what I consider to be canon when it comes to these big shows. Like
Sure.
like for me, I don't really see Rogue One as being part of Cassian Andor's story. I don't really see like the I don't know. It's a silly attitude to have, but we've talked about before. Our psychology, our human psychology is not really equipped for stories this big. So we can do whatever we want. Really, we can decide to take things seriously or not. It's all made up anyway.
hmm
So, point is, I'm going to just choose to take this seriously. And then if I don't like what they do with the character later, then I'll just say, "Oh, that didn't really happen."
Yeah, yeah. I I think we all have to have this attitude going forward with all this stuff is just pick and choose the parts that you like and ignore the rest. And
Yeah.
I will continue to do that as well. So, what did you think? I guess there's one thing we see, and I've seen complaints about this in several places about like the fact that all this ends up being related so tightly together in like the design of the show. It makes the world feel small. Like I mean, the Witch's Road, the entire concept of the Witch's Road, which in the language of the show is like one of these like core myths of witchdom. The song, which is like this thing that is kind of central to all the witches we meet in the story as well. Some of them more than other. All of this stuff comes from Agatha, and then the way like all these characters interact and relate. Do you think it makes the world feel small? And that like just not a lot of this is defined outside of how one particular character has created or influenced it.
I mean, it wasn't a feeling I had in the moment. I guess part of it is, uh, I mean, sort of yes and no to be totally useless in my answer. I think no. The no side is that I actually enjoyed that we were sort of seeing the edges of this world of witchdom, which we really barely saw any of this in the Wanda stuff
Yeah,
because Wanda is like not a she's a witch in some sense, but she never learned the craft. She just like is super powerful for some
sure.
reason.
Yeah,
Um, and but like all these other witches, these are like witches. They're part of this tradition of witchdom, and they make potions and brews, and they do auguries and read tea leaves, and you feel like there's this big world of witches that is just as big, if not bigger, than like Camartage and Doctor Strange's magicians, right? It's this whole other branch of magic in the world of the MCU, and you're like, oh, that's cool. Like, so that part didn't feel small. That felt like we were just getting our first peek, really, into what could potentially be a new world. Or just leave it like that. Just leave it a vague, like, oh, by the way, there's witches. Cool, that's fun. Um,
yeah, but essentially that entire culture is now like created by Agatha.
s-
um,
so my that I don't know if that was my impression. I think my impression was that it was just the Witch's Road song and the concept of there being like a series of trials that you could pass to get your heart's desire. But that, before Agatha, there were already rituals and magics, and she just invented, sort of unwittingly invented this one myth within a fabric of other pre-existing myths. That was my impression.
yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I just it's like it's such a core thing to what we see witches experiencing in this thing that it just I mean, I don't even necessarily agree it makes the world feel small. It just is interesting how everything we see kind of defined in this story is directly responsible by the people in the story itself. So there's like really nothing outside of it between the creation of the Witch's Road as a con from Agatha and as um a creation unwitting creation by Billy. It's all just part of these same central characters. Like it's not the smallness in the same way I think Star Wars smallness is when like every single character we meet is related to a Skywalker or Palpatine.
Uh-huh.
But it did strike me as like how like in an effort to like tightly weave everything together, they did just like tightly weave everything around one specific person.
Sure. I guess so. Okay, so
Like so a
I
good example of this is that Agatha is the one that binds what's her name?
yeah.
Jennifer, the one the witch who has been bound. Like it turns out Agatha's the one that bound her, and it's like, okay, just by happenstance.
Yes. So, my answer to this is like that's the to me that was the tone of the show we were doing, where it's kind of, I don't know if campy is quite the right word here, but it's something in the space of campy where there's a kind of winking self-referentiality to it that doesn't go quite as annoying as the MCU often does, but like I you know there's a self-conscious artificiality and just a tone of like we're all having fun here.
Hmm.
So that seemed just like totally like thematically tonally expected to be like, oh, it's all of course Agatha was the one who did that,
I
right?
mean, the name of the show is Agatha All Along, so
Yeah, there
I
you
think
go.
you're right there. Yeah, it was Agatha all along, all of it,
I'm
everything.
trying like I feel like there's a word or concept that is better than campy, but like the show's definitely doing a specific tonal thing
Yeah,
that allows it kind of allows it to get away with some sins. Like just the way Agatha behaves for one thing. It's like just on the right side of being incredibly annoying. Um but never quite crossing that line because it's like, well, that's kind of what we're doing here. That's kind of what the show is. And it's a kind of unreality that I would you can almost say most TV shows have to have a kind of unreality because the way the real world is just does not look the way we have decided that we're going to do our TV.
sure.
And they do it and a good TV show actually kind of knows what it's doing and does it on purpose and kind of controls it and directs it. And if anything, you might say that this is like one of the flaws of lesser MCU shows is that they don't quite know what tone they're doing. They're just kind of doing like, isn't this is how? What about this?
Yeah,
And what is the tone of Moon Knight? Um, whereas this show, like, there's a very firm hand on the tiller when it comes to like how do we want the viewer to feel and what are we doing tonally. Um, so I don't know. I went on a long tirade about tone and answered your question about something totally different, but I feel like that's why it didn't bother me is because I just felt like, well, that's the kind of story we're doing. So
yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think tone and style make up for a lot of a lot of faults, and I agree with you that like this show, it feels distinct. It does not feel like typical MCU stuff. It does not feel like the look of a typical movie. Yeah, I think you're just right there.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I feel like we've given the side characters a little bit of short shrift here. Like we talked about that we liked them, but we didn't really get into any detail on them. Any of them you want to like highlight and focus on?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, I think I blew through the show so quickly that it's actually hard for me to like remember it that accurately. But I'll say I do have an answer, which is the one who moves through time.
Yeah, Lilia is yeah, I mean again that episode, her kind of final episode is just the best episode in the show, I think, bar
I
none.
agree. I thought her performance was great. I love I'm just a sucker for that gimmick, which
The bouncing through time thing. Yeah.
yeah yeah
We've never said we liked episodes like that in the past.
yeah it's it's fun. My, there there are too many different examples of that being my favorite thing crowding their way into my mouth right now. Um, so that's definitely just the most enjoyable episode, and I think I liked your character the most overall. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of imagine what it's like to be a person who is kind of skimming through time randomly and trying to get your head around what that means and what that
mhm.
does to you and the knowledge of things you know and but the things you don't must have been just a very rough life, and we see her
Yeah,
kind of fully embrace it at the end in a beautiful way, I think.
I did think there was an incredible bittersweetness to this idea that she had this gift, but she didn't see it as a gift, and she suppressed it and
Hmm.
to the extent that it just stopped happening entirely. And then it was only really as her death was imminent that she understood it for what it was and accepted it. And it's like she didn't really get to enjoy or take advantage of it, but it was like that didn't matter. That's not what this was about. That's not what this journey was about. It's not about are you going to be able to min max your ability to see the future? It's just like do you accept this about yourself
Yeah.
and um have you found peace? And then she does, and then it's like, and then she chooses her end basically. Like she sees it coming, she sees what's going to happen, but she accepts it and she goes to it willingly because it's for a good reason. And that was beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like it. I also just really like the moments where she was clearly like just saying random non sequitur lines that were clearly her jumping through time, and you kind of knew that before it was revealed. But
Mhm.
it's always kind of fun when we get to loop back and see how those played out. Um, Man, what is just an enjoyable episode of television. I really really like that episode. Like
Yeah.
I'm telling you how uncertain and rocky about the show I felt going into that episode, and how it just like completely just reinstated my confidence that they knew what they were doing here.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Definitely.
But I mean,
Definitely.
like, she's definitely my favorite of the side characters, but I think they all have their purpose. They get their moments. The show does a very good job of spacing out moment and character work. Like it's funny because it's definitely an ensemble show, but like it also doesn't really have any characters besides those, right? Like the if you look at like the sheet, the IMDb list, it's the Coven, and then after the Coven is David A. Payton, who played Herb, the neighbor,
Uh-huh.
is the next one down, right? So it's like this is an ensemble show, but it's an ensemble show where the whole cast is just the ensemble, and that's it,
Yeah.
essentially.
That's true. Yeah. I kind of like that though.
Yeah, no, it allows them all to have sufficient time. It really does,
Mhm.
and I think that's one thing the show does very well. I guess I don't know. How do you feel about Aubrey Plaza's Rio slash death? Um,
Um
Pretty mixed on it overall.
I guess in the end, like none of this bothered me at the time, which is why I don't feel too inclined to complain about it. But in the end, I'm just like, well, so like, what the heck are we doing with this character? Like, is she actually is she, is this persona a complete put on, and she's actually just like a revenant, like spiritual manifestation of death, or is that like is she actually Aubrey Plaza walking around making jokes? And I don't really care, I guess. So that's why it doesn't bother me. I just took that again as like that. It doesn't matter. That's kind of the kind of show that this is. Those questions aren't important for this type of show.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you're right. But yeah, I mean, we kind of get to see like behind the veil a couple times that we see the spooky death skeleton face of
Mhm.
hers. So
I guess I like the idea. I kind of like the revelation of her, where it's like, there's a mystery with her. There's something going on, and then the revelation is that she's death. And I was like, okay,
yeah, that was
cool,
cool.
sweet.
Yeah,
Um, I just we talked just kind of generally about how good the narrative is, but I think the pacing deserves a compliment. Like there's a reason why I was able to sit there and watch 6 episodes in a row. That doesn't really happen if there's really any like drag, then I probably would have just been like, all right, time for a break. And I would have gotten up. And that wouldn't have been like, oh, the show's bad now. It just would have been a break. But as it was, there were no breaks, and it also didn't feel like frantic and stressful and exhausting, right? It was a good even keel between right in the sweet spot between overly tense and exhausting on the one side and boring on the other. Just perfect.
yeah, I agree with you. I was trying while you were talking to look up like what the episode lengths were, and I'm unable to find that off the top offhand. But they range in length, as I'm remembering, but none of them are too long. I don't think this is an hour long show. I think also the problem is like Disney Plus always has like 10 minutes of putting the credits in every single language that the show appears in at the end. So like it always just looking at the runtime when you boot up the episode on Disney Plus never ends up being totally accurate to what the actual length of the content is, but they range from probably like I would say 30 to 40 something minutes, which is I think a pretty good sweet spot for a television show. Not too
Yeah,
long, not too short. I agree with you. The pacing works very well. There's moments of downtime where we get our characters to just do character stuff. There's moments of high tension, especially in these trials. Again, like to go back to one of the first things we said, just like the going from trial to trial structure like does a lot of heavy lifting as far as getting people to understand the structure of the show and defining the pace of the episodes and the show as a whole. Like it just does a lot of that work for you. It's kind of a cheat code, and it's very effective.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. The episodes were like 30 to 40 minutes, basically. I
Yeah,
looked it
that
up.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Perfect. More of this. Mwah. Love it.
Yeah. I agree.
So, are you in on Marvel shows again?
No, no. Honestly, if I heard good stuff from people who I trust, then I will try something. That is my continued policy. But like, when you were listing the episodes at the beginning of this conversation, or sorry, when you were listing the shows at the beginning of this conversation, I realized I watched less than half of these shows,
Mm-hmm.
and I've just heard nothing. And the ones I haven't watched, I've never heard anything good about them.
Yeah.
So no.
But Daredevil Born Again comes in March.
Um. Okay.
But Ironheart comes in June.
I mean, these might be great. Like that's I try to
Sure.
be like the again, maybe those will be the best things ever because they're so far away from the Eye of Sauron, right? Like no one cares about them, and thus a team of talented writers gets to just quietly make a good story. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe it'll just suck. Maybe it'll just be terrible. We'll see.
I don't know. I have not a lot of energy for the MCU right now.
Mhm.
Which is kind of remarkable because just the fact that I was in on the show like astounds me. But um, I don't know what movies are coming out next year. I know like Daredevil or not Daredevil, Deadpool and Wolverine was like the only MCU movie this year.
Mhm.
I think next year is Fantastic Four, which is I think kind of gonna be a big deal for them. I think it's like the one kind of establishing where they're going from here with everything. So that seems like a big deal. Um, like how are you feeling? This is kind of we can just kind of slowly shift into our closing show subjects, but like how are you feeling about comic book movies in general? The comic book landscape right now. How you feeling about it?
Um, I don't know. I feel like we're re-entering a period that actually feels very comfortable and familiar to me as a child of the 90s. Um,
You mean bad comic book movies?
like a lot of totally disconnected, often bad and but different movies. Like because we got the Batman recently, which obviously not MCU related, but felt very different. It was going for a different thing. We're getting apparently the Penguin TV show is amazing. Speaking of comic book stuff,
I've heard
um,
that. I have not watched an episode myself,
I
but
haven't
I heard
watched it
that.
either, but I've heard from people who don't normally watch any comic book stuff. I've heard that it's good, which is to me a good sign.
So here's my
Um,
question about that though, and this is a question knowing the fact that I haven't watched the actual show yet, but like, isn't there a part of you that just wants to watch a show about a mobster and
and
it doesn't need to be a show about about Penguin? Like, isn't there like, do we need to put Colin Farrell in a fat suit and 10 tons of makeup to do a mobster show? I mean, the answer
apparently,
is yes,
yeah,
essentially, because it
right.
wouldn't have gotten made otherwise. But like, this is what I struggle with.
It's like it's all marketing, right? It's all just like, all right, how are you going to make money? How are you going to make? We have money to spend making movies and TV shows. How are we going to spend it? Well, we know that these idiots will come see things that are attached to things they recognize, and they won't go see things that they don't recognize. So, and we also know, despite we also know that we can't just make the same things over and over because they'll know we're doing that, and then they'll stop going to see those things.
Uh huh.
So what we have to do is use the things they recognize, but then do different things with those things, such as I want to make a story about mobsters. All right, fine. We'll do it's the penguin. The penguin is the mobster. There.
I love the one of the quotes for this says Tony Soprano meets Gotham.
Yeah.
Why couldn't Tony Soprano just meet Queens?
'Cause nobody would have seen it.
No, they did. It's called The Sopranos. We did it already.
So that's an interesting question that I don't really know the answer to, but like my feeling is like that was an era where the media landscape looked so different. Th- That meaning when The Sopranos was coming out, that just like if they made The Sopranos again now, would people watch it?
I have no idea.
I have
Maybe.
no idea.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I don't know either.
I still like feel like people will find really good television no matter what. I believe that. And
Yeah.
look, I haven't watched any of the Penguin. I need to watch this before I actually conclude on this, but I just can't help but like I look at Colin Farrell just like unrecognizably, and I'm like, can't we just let him be Colin Farrell and then also be a gangster?
I love Colin Farrell so much.
Me too. Me too. We need to watch that show.
Yeah.
Can
Let's
I
do-
can I read you the comic movies that came out in 2024?
Yeah.
Just just so we're on the same page here.
Uh-huh.
Venom: The Last Dance.
Great.
Craven the Hunter is the final one coming out in December. It's
Okay.
not out yet. Madam Web, released back in February. Deadpool and Wolverine, the most successful of any of these. And Joker: Folie à Deux.
Uh-huh.
So not a great year for comic book films. I would say overall. I have not seen any of these actually.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see Deadpool and Wolverine pretty soon because it's about to hit Disney Plus. But
Yeah. I guess it's just worth saying the obvious, stating the obvious, which is that the main run of the MCU was an anomaly, the likes of which had never been seen before and might never quite work again in exactly the same way, where like they had a good run of good to great movies culminating in an actually good finale and climax. That never happened before, and they're certainly not succeeding in doing it again. So
yeah.
That's why I say this is more like what it was in the 90s, where it's just like, yeah, it's kind of a smattering of different people with different ideas doing random stuff. And
Yeah. And like, looking forward to 2025, like we have Superman Legacy, James Gunn's Superman film coming on July 11th, and then the Fantastic Four film coming on July 4th. So I feel like all this doom and gloom talk about comic books could immediately go away if both these movies land and do very well, which, I mean, I have pretty high expectations for a James Gunn Superman film.
yeah.
Who knows about Fantastic Four? I have no idea. We'll see. No idea.
Yeah.
I also think the Batman 2 is coming out next year. Is that true?
I don't know.
I think they might have pushed it. No, they pushed it. Okay. It used to be next year. It's now 2026. So
I just want to talk about the Fantastic Four for a second. I just think it's funny that they keep trying to make Fantastic Four happen. Like it's like there's people who think that the Fantastic Four are just these amazing superheroes and that there's this huge latent market for the Fantastic Four. And I've just always found them to have the most boring power set and just not be particularly interesting characters on top of that. And I don't know, like, and they've made like 3 Fantastic Four remakes or something ridiculous at this.
there's been 3 movies. Yeah, there was a movie and then a sequel with the Silver Surfer, and then they made a reboot movie that was it's just the worst. It was awful.
Yeah, and like I'm just like I don't. No, does anyone want this? Does anyone want Does like are there lots of Fantastic Four fans really?
I don't know. I mean, I think it is like the first family of Marvel, right? So I think the Marvel is always gonna be precious about these characters. So I think it's really important to them. I think that they do this right. So does that mean it's gonna be a good movie? I mean, I don't know. I think I mean I don't disagree with you. But I also think there's an opportunity here to do something good. So maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, sure. There's always an opportunity. I just don't find them intrinsically interesting.
Sure.
I mean, there's something intrinsically interesting about the idea of a technologist who builds his own armor based on the trauma of his imprisonment and then uses it to try to right the wrongs of the legacy of his family. To me, that's a good superhero design. There's something inherently dramatic about a young man who gets superpowers, uses them selfishly, and then his uncle dies in a way that he could have prevented if he hadn't been selfish, and he takes it upon him, etc. Like these are naturally compelling superhero stories, and like the Fantastic Four is just like they went into space and they got random powers.
Sure. I guess the only answer to that is, would you be saying that about Iron Man before you had seen the Iron Man movie?
Definitely not. But the thing is, I've seen 4 Fantastic Four movies. No, that's not true. I know I know the story of the Fantastic Four, and it just doesn't work for me. So, could you make it work? I'm sure you could.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem naturally compelling to me.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, we'll see what they do with it. I honestly don't know. I don't know the Fantastic Four. I think the most I know about Fantastic Four is just from those movies. I've never really read a comic or watched any kind of Fantastic Four stuff outside of the not very good films that they made.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. We will find out. You know what else we're going to find out, Matt? This is
What?
the last thing I want to talk to you about today.
Okay.
We're going to find out if Star Wars is good still. Star Wars is back, baby. It was just today announced that they are there is a deal for a trilogy of Star Wars films. Deadline is saying that this is going to be episodes 10 through 12 of the Skywalker saga, but that is not confirmed. It's just so Simon Kinberg has been tapped by Lucasfilm to write and produce a Star Wars trilogy. It has not been officially announced that they're episodes 10, 11, and 12, but Deadline is reporting that they've heard that it is 10, 11, and 12. So it's back. We took a break, but it's back again. Not exactly thrilled about the Simon Kinberg portion of this announcement, by the way, Matt.
Can you fill us in on who that is?
Let me just read. So here's a few things that Mr. Simon Kinberg wrote. He wrote Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the movie that broke up Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt. He wrote X-Men: The Last Stand. Not a great one. He wrote Jumper.
Yeah. Okay.
He wrote the first Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes film.
Yeah.
He wrote X-Men: Days of Futures Past. He wrote that terrible Fantastic Four movie we were just talking about. He wrote X-Men Apocalypse. He wrote X-Men Dark Phoenix. So, that's not great.
That's not the guy that I would have hired. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
For what? For the trilogy or for the first movie?
Oh, he's writing and producing the entire trilogy.
Dear God.
Now, let's be fair here. Lucasfilm and Disney have announced plenty of people working on Star Wars films that don't exist, right? Remember when Rian Johnson was going to write his own and direct his own Star Wars trilogy? And then everyone really, really got mad at The Last Jedi for some stupid reason.
Uh-huh.
And then both he and Disney just kind of collectively decided, hey, let's not do that. Why don't you go to Netflix and make murder mystery movies for the rest of your life? And he said, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And then there was, I believe, a Rogue Squadron movie that was supposed to be happening. There's been billions of movies announced. Weren't the Game of Thrones guys supposed to be working on some Star Wars movies too?
I heard that at one
that's
point.
happening anymore.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that in years.
So yeah, maybe what we're essentially reporting here is non-news because so many Star Wars projects have been announced that don't go anywhere. But if this is truly like 10, 11, and 12, it seems like out of any of these projects, this feels like the ones that are most likely to actually be made, because they're just going to run this thing into the ground forever. So you excited to watch more Skywalker saga?
What do we mean Skywalker? Like, is it going to be Rey? And that's now what we're calling the Skywalker saga?
Yeah, I mean, essentially just the films, the numbered films, is what
Uh-huh.
we're just now calling the Skywalker saga. Um, does that mean they're going to be chained to a Skywalker for the rest of eternity? Perhaps.
Maybe they'll just make the Timothy Zahn trilogy and be like, yeah, this actually all happened. These take place between episodes 6 and 7. No, these are actually episodes 7, 8, and 9, and the other ones are now going to be 9, 10, 10, 10, 11, 12.
I mean, I think they're just going to carry on with Rey, but I thought there was also a Rey movie announced, so I don't even know anymore.
Yeah, this is not really our lane anymore. I think I don't really. I'll go see it when it comes out. Like, I'm a huge idiot, so I'll definitely go see it and complain about it if I didn't like it. And like, it's not like look, like the I still have this fantasy that the people who made Andor are like recognized for their talents, and they say, "Hey, here's a bit more money. Make a movie." It doesn't have to be an Andor movie. In fact, I kind of prefer that it not be, because I kind of like Andor being the thing that it is. But like, make something that feels like that. Make a good story, and make people have emotions, and make characters that are deep and rich and that you care about when things happen to them. Make that movie. Why can't they do that, Scott?
That's pretty adorable. That's adorable.
Why can't they do why can't they? It's like if you were CEO of a car company or something, and like one of your divisions made just like the best car that everyone loved, and it suddenly sold like hotcakes, and your reaction was to be, someone was like, should we take the people in that division and like give them more resources and maybe let them make another car, a bigger, better car? And you're just like, no.
I
Nope.
don't think Andor made Disney a lot of money.
But
Matt.
people loved it. This is what drives me crazy, is it's like they don't understand their own business. I do, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm wrong, though. Like, I don't think I'm wrong that they don't understand their own business. They don't really know what people like. Or like they focus group and audience test things, and that makes them think that they know what people like. But really, people like what you said earlier. It's like, just have characters who behave authentically, and then have there be consequences, and do good basic storytelling, and don't do all this crap like the horribly made by committee episode 9. Like they did that on purpose. They made episode 9. If the choices they made led them to this, then what was the use of those choices?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I just don't see them ever like giving a Tony Gilroy, like, first of all, Andor costs like a shit ton of money. So like they kind of already gave Tony Gilroy a shit ton of money. Like that probably cost hundreds of millions of dollars to produce that television show.
That's true.
So like I don't know. It's like there is something interesting that happens the second you're working on a Star Wars movie, that it has to, like, all these expectations of what something has to be, and expectations from the fans and expectations from the studio, and all these things, that I think it just devours itself. And you're left with something that's like episode 9. And again, like, I know The Last Jedi is divisive and people don't like it and they get very mad about it. But like, I think you could at least say that movie's trying to do something.
Yeah. I'm actually not criticizing The Last Jedi here. I'm criticizing
I got you.
the next movie, the ninth movie.
Yeah, well, so I mean, what happened was they tried to do exactly what we were talking about with episode 8, and then people got real mad, and so they fell back on their tried and true strategy, which is like try to make everyone happy, and it didn't work, obviously, but
Isn't it weird though? Like, Star Wars is so weird and unique in this way, because apparently, not that we were around to see this, that apparently Empire Strikes Back got like the same reaction, right? When the Empire Strikes Back came out, there were
Yes.
people, posting on whatever served as a forum in that age, like, God, I can't believe they ruined everything with their, you know, like it wasn't until years later that it just became the default opinion that this is a great work of cinema, and the best of the Star Wars movies,
Yeah.
etc. But like that's the weird curse of Star Wars is like no matter what you do, everybody's gonna hate it when it comes out. Sometimes deservedly, like with Episode 9, but
Yeah. You don't
often
think we'll go back and look at Episode 9 favorably in 20 years?
I really don't.
I do want to point out that it still made $1 billion. Like
Yeah.
$1 billion is a lot of money. And even like the worst Star Wars movie made $1 billion. So like, and I think they're smart enough to recognize that if they kept pumping the movies out in the way they would, like that was just not going to be the case for very much longer,
Yeah.
which is why they kind of pulled the plug on this whole thing. But they're ready to try again. I
Yeah.
don't know why they. We don't know the details of this deal, right? So, like, did he pitch Lucasfilm on an idea he had for this trilogy, or is this just like, hey, you've done a lot of Disney stuff. Why don't you write it?
Sometimes I think they put out these announcements just to see what the reaction will be.
Yeah, you're
Like,
probably right.
so it's probably something like what you said. Like he pitched them, and they're just kind of floating the trial balloon to see what the reaction is. I think I did a calculation, or I should say, I got Claude to do a calculation for me, and I proved mathematically that with the exception of the Phantom Menace, because the Phantom Menace is an outlier where people didn't really know what they were getting into. With the exception of the Phantom Menace, all of the Star Wars films that have Harrison Ford in them got a way better ROI than all of the ones that didn't have Harrison Ford.
Get back Harrison Ford before it's too late.
You gotta get him back in there. And even if you look at like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, that movie made like 4 times its budget.
Yeah.
You gotta get Harrison back in there.
What about the most recent Indiana Jones, though?
Less so.
Yeah. Can I just say, I hope Harrison Ford never does another one of these again, because he's on an Apple television show called Shrinking,
Mhm.
playing like an old curmudgeon-y psychiatrist,
Mhm.
whichever. And it's one of my favorite TV shows on right now. It's just so delightful. It's him and Jason Segel, and it's just it's such a delightful show, and he's absolutely wonderful in it. So I hope he never plays Indiana Jones or Han Solo ever again.
I agree. I wasn't obviously seriously suggesting that, although I will say the part, and I'm repeating things that I've said in the past, but like you got to have a straight man for Star Wars to work. I still feel that's true. You don't literally need Han Solo, but you need a Han Solo. You need something like some kind of counterbalancing force to the self-seriousness. Like you could even argue that people might have felt different about literally The Last Jedi, that movie, if it had like one character in there to kind of be that,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like isn't Poe supposed to kind of be that character?
So kind of, but they don't hit the right notes with it. Like he's supposed to be irreverent, but it doesn't come off as like authentic to the character, right? I mean, you're totally right. That is totally what Poe is supposed to be, the Han Solo, but he just isn't. I don't know if it's the performance or the way they chose to do the character. It's kind of an interesting case study, actually, to say, they very intentionally set out to have like, okay, we need another hot shot, wisecracking, sarcastic, handsome heartthrob with dark hair and etc. But then have it just not at all work. I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. I'd have to rewatch those films to really dive into the why of this, but I don't particularly want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, there's something like the thing about Han Solo is he's like actually kind of smarmy. Like he's not perfectly cool.
Yeah, I mean, he's the Agatha Harkness of Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Just murdering people all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get you. Like, I think it probably results in trying to do like, I don't, obviously when they sat down to do Han Solo, they didn't sit down to do a Han Solo type, right? Because that didn't exist yet. They were just trying to make a character that filled a certain archetype. And now I feel like every time we do something like this, we are trying to do a Han Solo type.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't ultimately work.
Yeah. Or trying to do a Princess Leia type, which you could also point out is kind of what they've tried to do and also probably not succeeded because Carrie Fisher was a very specific person.
That is very true. Very true. All right, I'm done talking about Star Wars. Are you done talking about Star Wars?
I'm done. I got it out of my system. It builds up after a few months. You got to get it out. Yeah.
Yep. When is Andor season 2 coming out?
I don't know.
I think, there's no set date. I'm really worried, Matt. That's just never going to come out.
Me too.
All right, that is all we had for you folks this week. If you have any opinions on Agatha All Along or on the ongoing comic book landscape and Star Wars, please reach out. You can talk to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on Twitter at doofmedia, or at our subreddit r/doofmedia.
That's right. And if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to subscribe and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
If you like what we do here and want to support us financially, you can do so. You can become a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge at any of the available levels. There's a bunch of bonus stuff there. Right now, we have our poll for our book club going on right now that patrons can vote on. Book club will be this Friday. Today, if you are listening to this the day it came out, the 8th of November. It's November now. We're going to be talking about Dashiell Hammett's The Maltese Falcon, but we're also going to be deciding what book we're covering for next month. So you don't want to miss that, and you want to help vote for that on Patreon. You can also find our bonus podcast. We are going to be here in just a few weeks. Our new bonus podcast, which is a look at the television series From, 2 episodes at a time every month. So you definitely want to join and for that, I think it's going to be a really fun, detailed conversation, episode by episode conversation for that. So yeah, once again, that's patreon.com/doofmedia.
That's right. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks, that is it for us. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Not quite sure what we're going to be talking about yet, but we'll figure that out and let y'all know. Have a good week, everyone. We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.